Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Omar Ibrahim Paracha, and today the topic for presentation is approach to the patient with chest pain. At the end of this presentation, the fourth year MBBS students would be able to briefly explain the pathophysiology of chest pains, would be able to enumerate the differential diagnosis, and enlist the investigations and necessary treatment options for acute coronary syndrome. When we talk about epidemiology, nearly 5% of all emergency visits are related to the chest pain, and approximately 5 million patients per year visit the ER department with complaints of chest pain. So there are two types of chest pain based on the pathophysiology. The chest pain related to the visceral organs, which is called visceral pain, and a chest pain like uh, related to the skeletal muscles. So the visceral organs pain uh, is dull, diffuse, poorly localizing. It's kind of a discomfort, heaviness. Uh, all the pain which is related to the internal organs like heart, blood vessel, esophagus, and visceral pleura uh, is a kind of a visceral chest pain because they are innervated with the visceral fibers, especially the type C fibers. Uh, because of the dorsal fibers can overlap 3 levels above or below, disease of thoracic region can produce chest pain anywhere from the jaw to the epigastrium. The parietal pain, in contrast to the visceral pain, is sharp, can be specifically localized to the dermatome, and the dermis and the parietal pleura are innervated by the parietal fibers. So the initial approach to the chest pain is, uh, first of all, airway breathing and compression. This is the most important. If you see a patient and the patient is non-responding, you should start protocol for the basic life support. If the patient is non-responding, then after that, uh, if the patient comes for uh, with complaint of chest pain, give aspirin. If there is if you think that the patient is having acute coronary syndrome, do an ECG, do a cardiac and vital signs monitor, give medications for pain relief. As there is a wide differential diagnosis to the chest pain, you would guide your approach with necessary investigations, history taking, and then you would decide what is the diagnosis, and then you would start specific treatment. So in history, the important things are the onset, whether the chest pain has started suddenly or it has started slowly and then progressed with the time, is what are the relieving and what are the aggravating factors of the chest pain. Is it associated with exertion? Is it associated with food intake? Is it associated with emotional stress? What is the severity of the chest pain? What is the nature of the chest pain? Is it stinging in origin? Is it stinging? Is it dull? uh, what is the region where the chest pain is, and what is the radiation? If the pain which radiates to the jaw and the left arm is mostly cardiac in origin, the chest pain which comes in the epigastrium and then radiates backward is mostly because of the aortic dissection, or also of the pancreatic nature of chest pain. And what is the timing of the chest pain? Mostly the peptic chest pain comes at night. Mostly, the pleuritic chest pain comes with cough. So, what is the change in pain pattern? The most One of the most important thing is, what are the associated symptoms? Is there shortness of breath, diaphoresis? Is there vomiting? Is there heartburn? Is there food intolerance? In addition to this, you need to take the past medical history, family history. If there is a family history of ischemic heart disease, the family history of diabetes, hypercholesterolemia, and what is the social history? Is the patient, how is the patient lifestyles? It is sedentary? Does the patient is a manual worker? And what kind of food he or she takes? So on physical examinations, look at the journal appearance, take the vital signs, which are very important. Then inspection, look for the scars, look for the look where is the apex pulse, look if there are some heaves, tachypnea, and how is the pattern of breathing. Then auscultates for the murmurs, any rubs. Auscultate for the breath sound. Are there wheezes or crepitations in the breath? On auscultation, in the breath sounds, and gallops. Uh, Percussion and palpation is also important. Look for the jugular venous distension. Look for the crepitance in the chest, or you can also look for the crepitance in the area around the neck if there is history, or in the chest if there is history of trauma. uh, are there any bruises? Look for the abdomen. Is the abdomen swollen? Is the abdomen has any other um, signs? Extremities for the peripheral pulses, pedal edema, and tenderness. So these are the most important uh, causes of chest pain. In cardiovascular, MI, acute myocardial infarction, acute coronary syndrome, aortic dissection, cardiac tamponade, unstable angina, coronary spasm, Prinzmetal angina, cocaine-induced pericarditis, myocarditis, valvular heart disease, aortic stenosis, mitral valve prolapse, and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. The pulmonary causes are pulmonary embolism, tension pneumothorax, very important, very life-threatening, uh, mediastinitis, pneumonia, pleuritis, tumor, pneumomediastinum. Gastrointestinal causes are esophageal rupture, esophageal tear, cholecystitis, pancreatitis, esophageal spasm, esophageal reflux, peptic ulcer disease. In musculoskeletal causes are muscle strain, rib fracture, arthritis, tumor, costochondritis, neurological spinal root compression, thoracic outlet syndrome, herpes zoster, and sometimes psychogenic hyperventilation. All patients with psychogenic causes also comes with complaint of chest pain. So you have to keep all these differential diagnoses in your mind before approaching the patients, because and the other important thing is that uh, some some of these causes are life threatening, so you have to work fast, and also you have to give some preliminary medications, even if you have not yet pinpointed the diagnosis. So these are the life-threatening causes: acute coronary syndrome, pulmonary embolism, tension pneumothorax, aortic dissection, esophageal rupture, and pericarditis with tamponade. These you have to keep in mind. You have to act very fast, and you have to rule out these 6 causes before taking a long route of history investigations, and then coming to the diagnosis. So now the acute coronary syndrome epidemiology. uh, Adults over the age of 30 years presenting with visceral type chest pains, about 15% with would have acute myocardial infarction, and 25 to 30% would have unstable angina. So typical chest pain, which is very commonly sought out in emergency department, is a dull aching pressure like squeezing pain, which is worse on exertion and which is associated with diaphoresis and shortness of breath, which radiates to the arm and jaw. And majority of the patients uh, which come into the emergency department and having acute coronary syndrome do not have these typical type of chest pain. So you have to be very vigilant for these patients. So the cardiac risk factors are age, diabetes, hypertension, family history of premature coronary artery disease, family history of premature coronary artery disease. If someone's father dies at age of 75 or 85 because of MI, that is not a positive family history. Positive family history is uh, if your if the parents has premature coronary artery disease, and uh, which is for females it is 55 years, and for male it is 45 years. History of smoking, hypercholesterolemia, and cocaine abuse. So uh, when the patient comes and you are thinking on the lines of acute coronary syndrome, you have to take an EKG and look for some signs, look for some findings. So first is ST elevation MI, in which there are ST's elevation which is more than 1 millimeter, or a new onset LBB. The ST elevation of greater than 1 millimeter would be in the contiguous leads. For example, 2, 3 AVF are the leads presenting to the inferior portion of the chest. 1 AVL and V5, V6, V7 are the areas which present to the lateral area of the chest. 1, 2, V1, V2, V3 are the areas which present to the anterior. So it should be in contiguous leads. If you find in the ST elevation in only one lead, or which are not in the contiguous leads, it would not be it would not add to the diagnosis of ST elevation MI. There can be T wave inversion or ST depression. 5% of patients with acute myocardial infarctions have completely normal EKGs. So it is not that if you are looking at a patient and you are thinking and he's having all the symptoms of acute myocardial infarction and you do not find EKG findings, you have to admit him and observe him. So this is a finding. You can see that there are subtle ST elevations in the V1, V2, V3, V4, and also in 1 and AVL. And there are reciprocal ST depressions in the opposite area. As you can see, there is ST depression in these and inferior leads. So this is also an example of EKG findings which you can get, and you have to make diagnosis on it. So what about the cardiac biomarkers? There are different cardiac biomarkers which have different type, different profile of rise and peak. The most important is troponin, which start rising 2 to 4 hours and gets the peak in 12 to 24 hours and return to normal around 5 to 14 days. It is very sensitive, very specific. Other is creatinine, MB, MB variant of creatinine kinase, which starts rising 3 to 4 hours, peaks at around 24 hours, and comes back very fast in 2 to 4 days. Lactate dehydrogenase is an old cardiac marker, which we do not usually do in cardiac setups nowadays, and myoglobin, which starts rising very early in 1 to 2 hours, is very sensitive and powerful. So these are the patterns which you can see, that myoglobin starts very fast, peaks very fast and then comes down very rapidly. S- you can see that troponins uh, rises and then dips. So according to these cardiac markers, when you see a patient who comes into the ER and gives a history uh, of chest pain, from the time the patient has started chest pain, you would do these markers. Uh, eto- Echocardiogram uh, helps a lot in chest pain patients, but mostly in patients which have a subtle acute myocardial infarctions. Or so in echocardiogram, you would look for two things. If is there regional wall motion abnormality, oh, is there ejection fraction preserved or is less, and is there any valvular incompetence resulting from acute myocardial infarction. Uh, it detects 80% of acute myocardial infarction. So early screen for myocardial complications like aneurysms, valve abnormality, and structural destructions is also being diagnosed by echocardiograms. You can see this is an example of echocardiogram in which you can see. So when there is a regional wall motion abnormality, uh, this is the interventricular septal area. This is the posterior wall. So when there is a regional wall motion, you can see the one region which is contracting aggressively and another region which is not contracting. So on basis of this, you can diagnose uh, which area of myocardium is being affected most. So the treatment is aspirin, nitroglycerin, oxygen if there is low oxygen, and analgesia to relieve the pain. Uh, then other is beta blocker. You have to anticoagulate. The option is heparin or low molecular weight heparins like enoxaparin, uh, antiplatelet agents like clopidogrel, ticagrelor, prasugrel. If the patient comes in with acute myocardial infarction and is in the window period, which is 12 to 20, which is within 12 hours or of the chest pain, or within 24 hours with ongoing chest pain, you would think of thrombolysis with streptokinase or tissue plasminogen activator, or you can, or if he comes with the chest pain and is in window period, you can directly take the patient to primary percutaneous intervention, which is a type of a angiography technique from in which we just open the vessel by dislodging the thrombus. So if there is ST elevation MI, the options are aspirin, clopidogrel, beta blockers, nitroglycerin, anticoagulation, and thrombolysis. But in non-ST elevation, the option is aspirin, clopidogrel, beta blocker, nitroglycerin, anticoagulation, but not anti-thrombolysis. You would not then thrombolyze. You would then plan for percutaneous coronary intervention. If there is unstable angina, unstable angina is a variant in which the patient has cardiac chest pain, but the cardiac markers does not rise. Then you would give aspirin, beta blocker, nitroglycerin, anticoagulation, and risk stratification for the future planning. So you don't have to dispose patient if you are not sure what he is having, because the mortality is twice as high for missed MI. Missed MI is the most successfully litigated claim in other countries. So if you are confused what to do, just keep the patient in observation, observe the patient, and then dispose when you are. So So uh, a single set of cardiac enzymes is rarely of use, because if a patient comes too early and he's having symptoms, he or she is having symptoms, and you do cardiac enzymes and it comes negative, you have to repeat it after 8 to 12 hours to be uh, uh, to be confirm to confirm that he's not having cardiac risk stratification. Risk stratification goal is to predict the adverse outcomes after an event. So if the patient is of high risk, you just take the patient to the cath lab and do percutaneous coronary intervention. Or if the patient is of very high low risk, you can give the medicines and tell patient to follow up. So mathematical models, there are some mathematical models such as TIMI risk score, GRACE risk score, Pursuit risk score, uh, which help in risk stratifications, and also what to do with patient. Thank you.